For 99% of human history, money was simple. It was heavy, it was metal, it was mined from the cold, hard earth. But long before the first gold coin was stamped in Rome, and long before the first digital number glowed on a Wall Street screen, one civilization dared to do something different, something that sounds insane to the modern mind. They didn't mine their money, they grew it. Imagine a world where your bank account literally grows on trees. Imagine a world where drought isn't just a food crisis, it is a financial crash. Imagine a world where you can literally drink your life savings. This was the reality for the Maya civilization. To us, cacao is just chocolate, a sweet treat, a commodity. But to the Maya, it was the black gold of the ancient world. It was status, it was religion. And eventually it became a fully functioning, standardized currency that funded wars, built pyramids, and sustained an empire of millions. But this system had a flaw that haunts us even today. What happens when your money rots? What happens when the mint, the forest itself, begins to die? Welcome to the Economic Historian. Today, we aren't just looking at ancient beans. We're looking at the ancestor of modern credit, crypto, and fiat currency. This is the story of how the Maya turned bitter fruit into the ultimate power and the price they paid for it. To understand the money, you must first respect the machine that built it. Forget the Hollywood version of the Maya as primitive tribes living in mud huts. The classic Maya period, from 250 to 900 AD, was an economic juggernaut that rivaled ancient Rome. Cities like Tikal, Calakmul, and Palenque were urban giants. Tikal alone had a population of over 60,000 people. They'd paved highways, they had running water, they had astronomers who calculated the solar year with more accuracy than European scientists would for another 1,000 years. But here's the economic puzzle. Maya achieved all of this without the wheel for transport, and without beasts of burden. No horses, no oxen, no donkeys. So, how do you feed 60,000 people? How do you move tons of limestone, jade, and obsidian across hundreds of miles of dense, hostile jungle? You need an incredibly efficient market. And to have an efficient market, barter is not enough. You cannot trade a chicken for a jade mask. The math doesn't work. The double coincidence of wants makes complex trade impossible. The Maya needed a standard of value. They needed a currency that was portable, divisible, and rare. They found it hanging from the branches of the theobroma tree. Now, why cacao? Why not leaves? Why not rocks? For the same reason we use gold, or the same reason Bitcoin has value, scarcity and effort. Cacao is incredibly difficult to grow. It requires a specific environment, the deep, humid shade of the rainforest. It needs precise rainfall. It cannot survive frost. And it takes years for a tree to bear fruit. It's created a natural barrier to entry. You couldn't just walk outside and pick money off the ground anywhere. It required labor, land, and time to produce. In modern crypto terms, this was the proof of work. The value of the bean was tied to the difficulty of producing it. But it was more than just economics. It was spiritual. The scientific name, theobroma, literally means food of the gods. The Maya believed that the gods shed their blood to create humanity. And cacao was an offering back to them. It started as a ritual drink for kings and high priests, a bitter, spicy, frothy brew that signaled ultimate power. But as trade expanded, the bean escaped the temple and entered the marketplace. By the classic period, cacao had become the dollar of Mesoamerica. And thanks to Spanish chroniclers and archaeological records, we have something incredible. A price list. We know exactly what the cost of living was in the ancient jungle. Let's look at the ledger. A rabbit for dinner? That would cost you 10 beans. A freshly crafted clay pot? 12 to 20 beans. A woven cotton mantle? 60 to 80 beans. Turkey hen? 100 beans. But it gets darker. This wasn't just for goods. It was for people. Prostitute services were recorded at roughly 8 to 10 beans. And a slave? A human life? It cost roughly 100 beans, the same price as a turkey? Let that sink in. The Maya economy had commodified everything. Life, death, and dinner could all be measured in the same unit of account. But the Maya were sophisticated financiers. They knew that carrying 50,000 beans to buy a house was impractical. So, they developed a tiered monetary system. Think of it like our modern cash. Tier 1, cacao beans. This was small change, used for daily meals, market visits, and wages. Tier 2. Cotton mantles. These were large, standardized woven cloths. They acted like large bills or treasury bonds. They held value longer than beans and were used for taxes and large contracts. Tier 3. Jade and obsidian. This was the store of value, the gold bars, used for dynastic wealth and hoarding. This system allowed the Maya to scale their economy from a peasant buying corn to a king funding a war. But unlike gold, their base currency, the bean had a shelf life. It could rot, could be eaten by rats. This creates a fascinating economic concept called demurrage. Because the money would eventually decay, you had to spend it. Hoarding cacao for 50 years was impossible. This forced a high velocity of money. The economy kept moving because the money kept dying. Of course, wherever there is value, there is fraud. The Maya invented counterfeiting centuries before the Secret Service existed. Archaeologists have found caches of fake money in ancient markets. Here's how the scam worked. A fraudster would take a cacao bean, carefully peel back the skin, and remove the valuable chocolate nut inside. Then, they would fill the empty shell with dirt, sand, or avocado skin to match the weight. They would seal it back up and mix it into a pile of real beans. It became such a massive problem that market disputes were common. Merchants had to become experts in spotting fakes, squeezing each bean to test its density. It reminds us that the battle between the state and the scammer is as old as civilization itself. But who moved this money? Enter the puhuns, the merchant class. These weren't just traders. They were the most dangerous men in the Maya world. Because they traveled between rival city-states, they were the only ones with diplomatic immunity. They carried cacao, jade, and salt across enemy lines. But they also carried secrets. Maya kings used these merchants as spies. A merchant would enter a rival city to sell chocolate, but he would leave with maps of their defenses, counts of their soldiers, and rumors of political instability. The cacao trade wasn't just economics, it was espionage. The flow of beans determined the flow of information. When the flow stopped, war followed. But a biological currency has a fatal weakness. Nature does not care about your economy. In the 9th century, the Maya civilization faced a catastrophe, the Great Drought. For decades, the rains failed. Now, if your money is gold, a drought is bad for food, but your money still exists. But when your money is a plant, drought is a total liquidity collapse. Imagine the stock market crashing to zero, not because of a policy error, but because it didn't rain. The cacao trees died. The mint shut down. The value of the currency became incredibly volatile. In some places, cacao became so scarce it was too valuable to spend. In others, the economy reverted to crude barter. The complex web of trade that held the cities together snapped. The kings, who claimed to control the rain and the harvest, lost their legitimacy. The people abandoned the great cities. The temples fell silent. The jungle reclaimed the banks. The Maya eventually faded, but their lesson is screaming at us from the past. They built a system on something they thought was eternal. They thought the rain would always fall. They thought the beans would always grow. They were wrong. Today, we don't use beans. We use fiat currency and digital codes. We trust that the Federal Reserve or the algorithm is stable. But value is nothing more than a shared belief. Whether it's a seed, a metal, or a piece of paper, the moment the trust evaporates, the money returns to its true value, zero. The Maya learned that you cannot eat prestige. Perhaps as our own financial systems shake under the weight of debt and inflation, we're about to learn the same thing. History is a ledger, and the bill always comes due. I am the economic historian. Subscribe and learn to read the fine print.